Hey guys, this is Miss Esposito. For your notes today, you will need from your packet page 19, and then we're also going to work on page 21. So you'll need pages 19 and 21. We're going to skip page 20 for now, and we may come back to that in the future. Okay? All right, so at the top of page 19, it talks about the process for fractions, and we're talking about adding positive and negative numbers or adding integers. We've already learned how to add whole numbers and decimals. Now we're going to learn how to add positive and negative fractions. And the process for fractions is the same. It just requires more steps, okay? This should be a bit of a review, but the process is the same. Meaning if the signs are the same, we are going to add and use the same sign, okay? So for example, when I have 3/5 plus 4/5, I'm just going to add these fractions, and because they're both positive, the answer is going to be positive. So I have 7/5. You do not need to make this a mixed number. We will use improper fractions all the way through 7th and 8th grade. Okay, so we don't have to make that a mixed number. In the next problem, they're both negative. So we're going to add and use the same sign, which is going to be negative. So I know my answer is going to be negative. So I'm just going to add these together, and it's going to be 10/6. Now what I would do is simplify. Okay, we can always simplify. So if I simplify this by 2, I'm going to get -5/3. Okay? We always need to simplify if we can. All right, I'm going to do this last one, and then I'm going to turn you loose to do the next 2. All right? So we have -3/4 plus -1 3/4. So we already know the answer is going to be negative because we know we add and use the same sign. Okay? What I would do here, instead of worrying about this mixed number, I'm going to go ahead and turn it into an improper fraction. There are a couple of different ways to do this, and either way is okay, but turning it into an improper fraction is going to be the easiest way. So 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7. So this is going to be 7/4, okay? And so now I have -3/4 plus -7/4. And so I'm just going to add these together like I normally would. And that gives me 10/4, and it's negative, okay? And you can go ahead and simplify this fraction. So you would get -5/2. Okay? I'm going to let you guys do the last 2, and then we'll check them real quick. Okay, let's check these 2. I have -3/10 plus -9/10. And remember, we add and keep the sign the same. So this should be 9, 10, 11, -12/10. And when we simplify by 2, and it should have simplified to -6/5. On this last one, we would have turned these into improper fractions. So you would have ended up with 8 times 2, which is 16, plus 3. So you have 19/8 plus 8 times 1 plus 1, 9/8. You should have gotten 28/8, which is equal to, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little messy here, 28/8. If we, let's just simplify that by 2. Even though there's a higher number, it's okay if we use a smaller number. So if I simplify this by 2, I get 14/4. And then I see I can simplify it again by 2, okay? So you should have had 7/2 for that one, 7/2. If the signs are different, you are going to subtract and take the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value, okay? In this case, one of these numbers is negative and one of these numbers is positive. And I have a mixed number, okay? So I'm going to change this mixed number to an improper fraction. So I still have negative 2 over 3. And I'm going to change that to a mixed fraction. So it's 3 times 1, which is 3 plus 1, 4 thirds. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and subtract these. I'm going to take 4 thirds minus 2 thirds. Okay. 4 thirds minus 2 thirds gives me 2 thirds. And then I decide which one has the biggest absolute value. Okay, which one is the greater number? And 4 thirds has the greatest absolute value. Remember, absolute value is the distance from 0 or the positive number. Okay, so which one is bigger, 2 thirds or 4 thirds? 4 thirds is bigger. So my answer is going to be positive. All right, let's do this next one. I have 7/8 and I have negative 5/8. Okay, now I go ahead and subtract. 7 minus 5 is 2. That gives me 2/8. And then I decide which one has the greatest absolute value. Which one is the largest number? Okay, in this case, it is 7/8. It is positive. So I know that my answer is going to be positive. Okay, but I would go ahead and reduce this down to 1/4. All right, I'm going to let you guys do the last 3, and then we'll check. All right, let's check these. Again, this 5/12 is positive, negative 7/12 is a negative number, so we're going to subtract because the signs are different. So I take 7 minus 5, that gives me 2/12. Okay, which one is bigger? The 7/12 is bigger. It has the negative sign, so I know my answer is going to be negative. And then I want to make sure that I reduce. And I reduced by 2 there. On this one, the signs are different, so I'm going to subtract. When I subtract, I get 8 minus 4 is 4. So I have 4/9. The 8/9 is bigger than the 4/9. So negative wins that one. On the last one, you would have needed to change this to an improper fraction. So you have negative 7/10 plus, and you go ahead and change this to a fraction, and it would have been 13 over 10. Okay, and because the signs are different, we subtract. 13 minus 7 is 6. So you get 6 over 10. 13/10 is bigger than 7/10, or has the biggest absolute value. So my answer is going to be positive. When we're adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators, we need to follow the process for adding fractions with like denominators, okay? So we find the common denominator, and then we do the exact same thing we did up here. But you have to have a common denominator before you can add and subtract, okay? So in this case, I look for my common denominator. I see here that it's 6, okay? I want to make both of my denominators 6. So I have negative 1/6, and to make this a 6, I have to multiply by 2, right? I multiply by 2 there. So up here I do the same thing. 2 times 2 gives me 4/6. So now I have negative 1/6 plus 4/6. My signs are different, so I'm going to subtract and get 3/6. And then 4/6 has a higher absolute value, so my answer is going to be positive. I'm going to do one more. I have 5/8 plus negative 3/4. I want to make my denominator the largest common denominator. In this case, it's going to be 8. Okay. If I want to make the 3/4 into 8ths, I would multiply 4 times 2, which means I need to do the same thing on the top, 3 times 2. And that gives me 6 over 8. So I have 5/8 plus negative 6/8. And so their signs are different, so I'm going to subtract, and that gives me 1/8. And then 6/8 has the larger absolute value than 5/8. So my answer should be negative. All right, I'm going to let you guys do the next 2. All right, let's check these. You should have had 3/12 plus 5/3, which was negative. And before you subtract, you have to make your denominator the same. So we have to take this and multiply it by 4. Okay, so up here, 5 times 4 gives you 20. Okay, so now you have 3/12 plus negative 20/12. So I found the common denominator. Now my signs are different. I'm going to subtract. That gives me 17/12. The largest absolute value is the negative 20/12. It's negative, so my answer is negative. On the next one, the first thing I do is find the common denominator. In this case, my common denominator is going to be 10. I can multiply these two. Okay, so if I want to make my 1/2 10, I would have to multiply by 5. Okay, and if I multiply by 5, I would get 5/10. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. I need to make my denominator 10. So I'm going to multiply by 2 on the top and the bottom to make my denominator 10 here. So you should have had 5/8 plus 8/10. All right. And we end up with 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 tenths. And this one would have been negative. I'm sorry. The biggest number is 8/10. So your answer should be positive here. All right. Let's move to subtracting integers. Okay, so you're going to skip page 20 and go ahead and turn to page 21. Okay, when a number and its opposite are added, the sum is 0. Okay, when you add a number to its opposite, the sum is 0. When we're subtracting integers, we're going to rewrite the problem to add the opposite. We're going to rewrite the problem. We're going to add the opposite, and then we're going to follow the adding integers rules. It's much easier to add than it is to subtract, okay? So we are going to go ahead and rewrite these problems. So for example, this problem at the top was originally 6 minus 7. Well, instead of subtracting 7, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to add the opposite. So it is 6 plus negative 7. Okay? Instead of 6 minus positive 7, it's going to be 6 plus negative 7. I'm going to add the opposite. Same in this case with the negative 9 minus a positive 11. We are going to rewrite that as negative 9 plus negative 11. And then the last one, we start with negative 3 minus negative 8. Well, instead of subtracting, we're going to take the opposite of that and add it, okay? We're going to take negative 3 plus positive 8. Negative 3 plus the opposite of negative 8, which is positive 8. Okay? Let's look at these three. I start out here with negative 5 minus 9. Okay, well, I know I'm going to keep this one the same, and I want to add the opposite of 9. The opposite of 9 is negative 9. And I put that inside parentheses so we can see that negative sign a little bit easier. In this one, when I rewrite this one, I keep my first number the same, and instead of subtracting, I'm going to add the opposite of negative 3, which is positive 3. Okay. On the last one, I keep my first number the same. It's negative 2. And instead of subtracting, I'm going to make this a plus, and I'm going to add the opposite of negative 10, which is positive 10. Okay, we're always going to add the opposite. I'm going to do some of these with you, and then I would like for you to do the rest, and you can check your work. If you solve them correctly, then your sum will match. So I'm going to do column E, and then I would like you guys to do F, G, and H. Okay, you can check your own work by seeing if your sum matches, and I'll show you what I mean by that. All right, so for E, we are going to keep the first number the same, and we're going to add the opposite of positive 6, which is negative 6. Okay, so 9 plus negative 6. Now I'm going to use my rules. Okay, my rules are if the signs are different, we add them together. I'm sorry, if the signs are different, we subtract. So I would get 3, and the largest absolute value gets the sign. So this would be positive because 9 is the largest. Okay, for the next one, I'm going to rewrite this. Instead of minus, I'm going to put 4 plus, and instead of positive 7, I'm going to have negative 7. Okay, and again, my signs are different, so I'm going to subtract. 7 minus 4 is 3, and 7 has the largest absolute value, so my answer is negative. In this case, I'm going to have negative 7, and instead of subtracting 12, I'm going to add the opposite of 12, which is negative 12. Okay, now here my signs are the same, so I add and keep the sign. That's my rule. So 12 plus 7 is 19, and my sign stays the same. It's negative. Now I'm going to take negative 9 and keep it the same. I'm going to add the opposite of negative 9, which is positive 9. Remember, in this case, we have two opposites here. Our answer is going to be 0. 0 doesn't have a sign. Negative 9 plus positive 9 is 0. You would subtract because the signs are different, and you would get 0. 0 doesn't have a sign. Okay, so to check your work, you just add your answers together to see if the sum is negative 19. Okay, so my first one is a positive 3. I'm going to add that to a negative 3, and we know that 3 plus negative 3 is going to give me 0. And then I have negative 19 plus 0. So if my column adds up to equal negative 19, I can pretty much say I did that correctly. Okay? All right. I'm going to let you guys do F, G, and H, and we may check this in class.